Windows is better than macOS. Period. That's what some people in the comments of my Mac versus Windows video seem to be so sure about. But maybe there's some truth to this ridiculous, out-of-order statement. Let us investigate. Screenshots. Usually, the thing that you want when you take a screenshot is to send it to someone as fast as possible, or add an arrow to it. It's so easy on Windows, you just click and boom, there's an arrow. But on Mac, oh boy, you have to click markup and then where the hell is the arrow? Of course it's under lines. For some reason right now, I can't even click on the arrow. Moving on. Next thing is closing apps on Windows and Mac. But it's not what you think. You see, where Windows has an advantage is in its size. The size of the X, of course. Since the X to close apps is at the top right, I can simply flick my mouse and close that window instantly. But on Mac, look, it's just a teeny little dot and you have to click like 5 times, especially if you're using the trackpad to catch it. Now, of course, if you're a professional, then you can use a keyboard shortcut, Command W, to close a window of an app, or Command Q to close an app fully on Mac. Another thing that Tim could probably borrow from Windows is not maximizing things in a separate desktop. Why would you do that? When you double click on a YouTube video on Windows, it just goes full screen in your current monitor. But if you double click on Mac, it opens a separate virtual desktop, which means that if I have a bunch of virtual desktops, it will move it to the very end of the line, which now means that in order to go to the first desktop, I have to just keep doing this. Now again, if I was a professional, I could click Ctrl+1 and jump to the first one immediately, but then to go back to the video, I would have to do this again. Now, most of you probably know that you can't natively snap windows on Mac, and it requires third-party apps. It's not a big deal because it takes a few seconds to install the app, but what's unfortunate is that when you're dragging a browser tab, you can't immediately snap it to the right or left of your screen. You have to let go of the tab, then pick it up again, and only then it snaps. On Windows, you can do that. It's such a tiny thing, so probably no one cares. Another thing that no one probably cares about is the longer animation on the newest MacBooks when you're switching virtual desktops. On the old versions, all Macs had a 60 Hz screen, which means that the screen refreshed 60 times per second. And the newest ones, like this MacBook Pro here, have a ProMotion display, which means that the maximum refresh rate of it is 120 times a second. This is very nice, and it makes everything super smooth on the screen, like moving your cursor, but what's not nice is that it now takes almost twice as long to switch virtual desktops. If you're switching them once or twice a day, that's no problem, but if you do that 100 times a day, this becomes really annoying, especially because it locks everything on your screen when you're switching. So if I have a text document open on one desktop and then something else on another one, as soon as I switch, I have to wait a few seconds and only then start typing because it will not register and start typing on the old desktop. Anyway, another useful thing that Mac could borrow from Windows is the middle click on the trackpad. There is an external app for this called Mac Mouse Fix that can add a middle click to your mouse, and many other apps such as Middle Click or Moz, I believe, but it's not native and it works a lot worse with third-party apps than it does natively on Windows. What the middle click allows you to do is basically open links in new tabs or close browser tabs without having to click on the little X. It pretty much does the same thing as pressing the scroll wheel on your mouse, and I use it very often. Now, another thing that Windows has is being able to set your taskbar to display on 2 external monitors. This kind of works with the dock on Mac, but it kind of doesn't. If the dock is located at the bottom, then when I move my mouse to another monitor, it will show up there. But if it's on the side, and then I have another monitor, it will only show up on the main monitor. There's no way to display it on another one. Next is the built-in clipboard manager on Windows. On Windows, if you press Windows V, it will bring up the clipboard manager, which basically saves things that you copy, so then you can paste them later. On Mac, there's no native feature for this. However, if you use an app called Raycast for replacing your Spotlight search, there is a built-in clipboard manager. Another cool app is called Mackie, which is basically just a free utility that I use to manage my clipboard history. Now let's talk Alt-Tab, or Command tab on Mac. When you switch apps on Mac with Command tab, you only see icons of apps that are open. On Windows, you can actually see previews of those apps. Of course, as with everything else, there is an app for this on Mac called Alt-Tab, but it doesn't really work as well as the native Windows feature because sometimes it fails to show previews. But the previews are not the most important thing. What is important, in my opinion, is being able to see if an application has multiple windows open. So for example, now I have 2 Chrome windows open, but in order to see them, I have to click the down arrow and it will display both of them. On Windows, it's just a more seamless experience. But if we move on to actually useful things, you can't fix your Mac on your own. Thankfully, mine hasn't broken on me yet, but my Windows laptop has. And guess what? I was able to open it myself, take everything out, fix the issue, and put it back together. As long as it works, it's amazing, but when it breaks, most people's only option is to buy a new one or pay $10 trillion for a repair. And of course, the most important thing that blows all of these issues away is not being able to game. I'm very lucky that I have both Windows and Mac, so I can game on Windows, but if I only had to choose one OS for the rest of my life, I think it would still be Windows, because how else am I going to rank up in CSGO? After watching this video, you probably think that I'm a complete Mac hater, which is not true. I'll tell you why in this video. And if you want me to flip this around and make another version of things that Windows should borrow from Mac, let me know in the comments.